like at a gas station, right? And so so he's like moaning right next to the vending machine, like he gets like a crowd around him, like like what is this old man doing? And then he falls backwards, but his dick is stuck in the vending machine, and it like stretches out, and he's like hanging there.
So it's like a
And like,
wax stick that's like gonna,
yes,
yeah.
and and then like the people like run behind him and like push him back into the vending machine.
Oh, like the bystanders are like,
The
oh God, no, like
bystanders.
we got we got to retract that dick.
Oh my
That's too
god,
stretchy.
dude. I think it's one of the best pranks of all time.
That is really
Just because
funny.
they like participated.
Yeah. They're like, it's not supposed to stretch that much. We gotta get it back in there.
Like that means like they really like bought in, like really thought it was real.
Yeah. And then he like falls again, probably. And then they have to lift him back up. But then he's like actually
Yes.
enjoying the process because it's
Yeah.
it's starting to get rhythmic. And he's like, oh no.
Weird and Worthwhile podcast.
And you were just saying like we were like seizing. It's just like such cold.
Like, whoops, I told people I was part of a cult.
Yeah.
There's actually this is a quote that I love from, this is something my girlfriend's dad said to her, which was, he said, a lot of things are going to try to get you to join what they're up to in your life. And he said, don't join a cult, start one.
Dude, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I've always kind of known like from a young age that I'm definitely like the cult leader, or I'm like kind of like the guy behind the curtain who's like pulling the strings of the cult leader. I've always kind of seen myself as that from a young age. And I always felt like I would like I mean, I shouldn't say always, but like I remember having this thought as a kid, like and learning about religion, and my parents kind of like told me like they never really indoctrinated me into a religion intentionally, but they explained the concept of religion to me. Like there's a book, and like millions of people around the world like know about the book, and like you have these rituals that you do. And then I was like, oh, I should start a religion.
Yeah, that sounds like a good business model.
Yeah. So hey, maybe that plays out. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's always room for more. There's new
Mm.
people starting new ways of doing things all the time, including religions.
I'm getting really stoked on my book. Like I'm definitely like tooting my own horn, and like kind of like I've never published a book before, so I don't understand really like the process yet. So but I feel like I have beginner's luck on my side here.
I think you do. Yeah. I lean into that a lot in my life. Like there's some voice of society that says like, oh, your first attempt won't be very good. And that like you need to do multiple trials before it's actually that good. And I'm like, I don't subscribe to that model. I subscribe to the beginner's luck model where because I'm unaware of all the pitfalls, I don't actually give them any energy from my thoughts. And then therefore I just don't fall into the pits that people are typically affiliated with in the beginner situation. And it's just a very good thing. And it's a very strong start.
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to like have conviction in that mindset. Although when you start putting things out to the public, like I have a piece that I've written that I know is a good piece, and I probably already shared it with you. Um, and I think you yourself told me that like you actually read the whole thing, which tells me that it was a decent piece. But I haven't posted it online yet because yeah, it's like personal stuff, even though it's not like I'm putting up my address and my social security number. There's no security concerns, there's no real privacy concerns, but it's like financial stuff, and like there's these mental blocks that are still there. And like I'm sure like if I was in any kind of academic setting, like it would be like inappropriate to post. Like almost everything I write would be like inappropriate for an academic setting, which means I'm on the right track. But nonetheless, having that knowledge that I'm on the right track doesn't make it easier to like hit the publish button.
Yeah, well, It's interesting you say that, because my girlfriend's writing a book right now too, and she's very much in this back and forth process where what she's writing is incredibly valuable, but it also runs contrary to certain well-established ways of doing things, which still generate people a lot of money. And so she's kind of trying to navigate that blowback of like, there's going to be some blowback, or there potentially could be blowback from what she's saying, even though what she's saying is very well intentioned, and it's just putting it out there to help people, and it's it's actually great information, but it challenges certain status quos, and therefore there's some, you have to learn how to navigate that. And it's like, what can you say and what can't you say? And it's like the more institutionalized things are always trying to regulate what the people under their banner can say, and so she's in that process.
Yeah, it just reminds me of this quote that I heard from Curtis Yarvin, and I'm gonna butcher it, but it was something along the lines of this: like, you don't get the you don't get to have your cake and eat it too, in the sense that when you speak truth to power, you're not going to get both the material benefits and the spiritual benefits of speaking truth. So it would be naive to think that you're going to come out with the truth and you're going to get like money and and not suffer the consequences of speaking truth to power. So nonetheless, there's always spiritual benefits to speaking the truth.
I like that. Yeah, the spiritual benefits are always apparent, and then hopefully there's some sort of actual prosperity and rolled into it as well. But yeah, you can't be sure that those two things are going to go together.
Right. And I think you can consciously like divert your thinking away from like money seeking and status seeking, because if you're going down that path while you're creating, you're just not going to produce good work.
Yeah, full on. It's just the content needs to speak for itself, and the mindset and the energy behind it must come from a place of, this is either just good, pure channeled stuff, or this is just funny and entertaining stuff, or there's something inherently valuable about what I'm putting out, and there isn't just this like money seeking attachment to it, because that will kind of permeate its way into the work.
Oh, it will. Yeah.
And people will notice it.
The truth is always shining through.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been like writing, and the more I write, like the more I think like I'm just out for these little gems, like these little nuggets. If I can get like 3 or 4 little nuggets, like, and by nuggets I mean like a sentence or a couple sentences that are just like so like potent and clever, and like you want potency in your writing. And I heard this one guy say, if I had more time, I would have written less. Which is to say that he would have edited it further and further down into something extremely potent.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and especially in the era of communication that we have now, where people will only really give you a few seconds of their attention, perhaps. It's good
Yeah.
to really be focused on the in unit pieces of the writing, so that way when you're presenting something for a marketing situation, or just to make someone aware of what it is, it does, it's potent. And there's also this quote that I come back to a lot. I don't even know if it must be a quote, but just the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And so distilling your effort down into those unit pieces can be a really valuable thing. And this has been a transition, or something that I've been really focusing on for the last maybe 6 months, a year, but just coming back to that attitude of like trying to really give the fullness of my efforts to small things, like even just routine tasks, but just being with them fully and doing a really good job of them, and just letting that be like a very well executed task followed by a very well executed task, and then not half-assing anything, because that, again, that attitude of half-assing things is just going to show up when I'm when it really matters. So let me just actually see how well I can execute whatever it is that happens to be in front of me.
Simplicity is always a winning strategy.
I agree. Yeah.
So Yeah, I come back to like the writing piece of it, and writing less words. Um, Someone once told me, like, there's primary sources and there's secondary sources and tertiary sources, and uh, if you go in the other direction, like back towards primary sources, eventually you get to just the raw truth, like the raw truth of the world, like is the OG primary source. Um, so the more words you have, like every word you could kind of imagine as like cutting up truth into a little piece, and that is the word, and the words make sentences, and the sentences make paragraphs, and simply like the more you can describe the primary source in the least amount of words, the closer you are going to be to the primary source.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like you've said before. It's like language is an incomplete medium of communication, or something to that extent. Is that like we're never going to quite be able to convey our inner experience to another person through the written word or through the spoken word. We're just giving it our best effort, and it actually kind of obfuscates the truth to some extent, because we can't really convey what is true. We can only know it, perhaps even just that for an instant. But this reminds me of a story that I heard, a really cool story about this woman's near-death experience. I watched something called the Heal documentary a couple of years ago, which was just a number of instances of people talking of, radical ways of healing their body, which are not really that well known, or different approaches that may not work for everyone, but clearly seem to have worked in certain instances. And here are some of the people that have done it. And in this case, this woman was, I think she had really, really bad cancer, and it was super progressed, and it was stage 4, and her body was shutting down, and she was like almost about to die. And her, like, I think she had fluid in her lungs, and like her tumors were like huge. And anyway, she was very close to being dead. And as she was entering kind of this comatose state, she experienced leaving her body, and she experienced connecting with her father, with whom she had had a very challenging dynamic, because she married someone that he wasn't that happy with, and that kind of like threatened their relationship, and he had died some time ago, and that whole issue was unresolved. And so her understanding of her relationship with her father was, oh, this is hard because I have done the thing that he didn't want, and now this is between us actually connecting. But what happened was, when she connected with the spirit of her father in this space beyond her body, none of that mattered. None of that mattered. And without any words exchanged between them, she just felt the pure love that they shared. And it was just all understood that it was okay, and that this was just a small surface level thing that was not really a big enough deal to interfere with between the actual love between a father and his daughter. So like, that was pretty cool. And it is cool to think that we might be capable of such things as humans, of actually really conveying the felt emotion and the truth to one another without needing these incomplete vehicles of
Right.
communication.
Yeah, words are like the dirtiest form of communication. There's so many languages beyond words. I wish I had like a specific term for like languages with like words, and then languages with non-words. I wish we had a little bit of
Yeah.
delineation there.
Well, there's a tribe that communicates by whistling. I think they're one of those undiscovered, like remote, untouched tribes, but their communication is whistling. And they're just like, so I don't know if that gets any closer to a pure communication, if it's actually like music, or if it's actually just tonality. I know, yeah, like the way that we say words in English matters, but I've always wondered how much different it is for Chinese people, because I had a Chinese friend growing up, and he said that the word ma and the word ma were, one of them was mother and one of them was grandfather, or sorry, grandmother. And I don't know if it was actually ma. It was a word, but it was just a tonal difference, and it conveyed different.
Yeah. Well, we have plenty of situations like that, and I
Yeah,
don't have any like off the top of my head like
but
bring
you're
up.
right. Yeah, English contains a lot of those too. Yeah.
Yeah. Like upspeak totally changes like, and it's the same in Spanish. Like hablas means you speak, and then hablas means do you speak.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
So it's same thing, right?
It's the same thing. Yeah. It is just interesting to notice though that it can be that like such a small thing.
So yeah, it's upspeak when you inflect upwards at the end of the sentence or the word. It indicates uncertainty, which indicates it's a question. So a lot of times in my writing, I'll ask rhetorical questions, and to indicate it's rhetorical, I just don't put a question mark at the end, because in the reader's head, if a question mark, they'll upspeak
Mm,
if they read it in their head. However, a period they won't. So then they'll know there's no uncertainty. It's a rhetorical question. I'm just like entertaining them.
interesting. Yeah, that's a good choice. I wonder how many other ways there are to actually like set up an expectation for someone who's reading something and then surprise them at the end with just the way that it's presented. Like to me, that is, I think maybe I've even said this to you before, but I that's some definition of comedy that I've always kind of felt to be true, which is that you set an expectation for the listener or the audience, and then at the last minute, it's something else. And then that is kind of the essence of comedy, where they're like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that," and now it's something slightly different. And that's just kind of one of the core qualities of any comedy.
It is absolutely a core quality. That surprise is
Mm-hmm.
essential, and like one of the reasons that I struggle to be a good audience member is that a lot of times I can anticipate the punchline, or I know where it's going, and I've already, so like they launched the joke and then like, oh no, like I've already heard, or like I can already kind of like see it, it's just not surprising enough. So but um the best like comedy for me is like where they say something they're not supposed to say, and then everyone's like surprised that they even went there.
Okay, yeah. They're crossing
um
a cultural or a societal divide with what they're saying, and that's unexpected.
right, like yeah, it has to be um punchy for me, like, and that surprise is the punch. That's why they
Mhm.
call it the punchline. um and the other thing I love is pranks.
Mm. Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
I don't know why, but like perhaps um like I love the authenticity of like the reactions, and like I don't think it's like there's anything what would you call it, like cynical, or like there's a German word where like it describes the experience of like getting pleasure from someone else's suffering, and I don't think this is that, because like I don't actually want like the people who are being pranked to like get injured or something, like, but I love like just like pulling people out of the matrix,
Mm.
like
Yeah.
they're in their boring day-to-day routine, and then like just something absolutely surprising happens, like and that's harmless to them, and for example, like one of the best pranks of all time, in my opinion, is Johnny Knoxville from Jackass, when he was in Bad Grandpa. I believe it's at the beginning of the film. Have you seen Bad Grandpa?
A long time ago, I think.
So,
Maybe. I saw a couple of his stuff.
um, he's going around like asking, I think, for like prostitutes, and he's like dressed up like a 90-year-old man, and he he like can't find any prostitutes, so he goes up to a vending machine and like puts his dick into the vending machine, and he's like, it's like at a gas station, right? And so so he's like moaning right next to the vending machine, like he gets like a crowd around him, like like, what is this old man doing? And then he falls backwards, but his dick is stuck in the vending machine, and it like stretches out, and he's like hanging there.
So it's like a wax stick that's like gonna,
Yes.
yeah.
and and then like the people like run behind him and like push him back into the vending machine.
Oh, like the bystanders are like,
The
oh God, no, like
bystanders.
we got to retract that dick.
Oh my
That's too
God,
stretchy.
dude. I think it's one of the best pranks of all time.
That is really
Just
funny.
because they like participated.
Yeah. They're like, it's not supposed to stretch that much. We gotta get it back in there.
Like that means like they really like bought in, like really thought it was real, you know?
Yeah. And then he like falls again, probably, and then they have to lift him back up. But then he's like actually
Yes.
enjoying the process because
Yeah.
it's starting to get rhythmic, and he's like, oh no.
Stuck to the soda machine. Gabriel, I'm stuck. My penis is stuck in the machine. Gabriel, help me. Help me. Oh, Gabriel! Gabriel! Help. Jiggle my shoulders. Jiggle my shoulders. Ow! Ow! Oh my God.
Oh, he's trying to jump it. Oh, no. Stop, man.
Oh God. Oh God.
It's
I was
gold.
struck by something as you were saying this, and it's this idea that I've stopped being as intellectual as I used to be in high school, or I stopped. I don't have as many thoughts running through my head as I used to, and in the same way, I think it's easier for me to enjoy things. I think there's some quality of being a very intelligent person that makes life less enjoyable, perhaps because you're being less surprised, just like what you described. Just like when you start listening to a comedy routine, you're like, oh, I know where this is going. And then you anticipate where it's going. And then when it goes there, you're like, well, that wasn't any fun because I got there first in my mind.
Right.
But what whether I'm intending to or not, I just don't have as many thoughts prompting my attention. I can take a line of thought consciously somewhere when I want to, but because that isn't just happening to me, I can decide not to do that when I'm watching a film, when I'm watching a comedy thing, and then I get to be surprised and I get to be kind of childlike and like, I don't know, imbecilic. But it's like, it's more fun, it's more simple, but I get to enjoy that surprise. And it's just interesting that like life perhaps becomes more fun when you are quote unquote stupider, but not like stupider in the way of, stupid's the wrong word. That's just the word that someone would use when they think you have less intelligence, but it's not really less intelligence. It's just utilizing the intellect to a lesser extent. So you're downplaying
It doesn't even need to be a lesser extent. It could just be in a,
yeah, it's just more in a box. You're consciously regulating the activity of the mind that might otherwise just be operating autonomously and like
right. You
beyond
just
your control.
suspend your intellectual pursuits in that moment.
Or yeah, all you're doing really is just suspending analysis. I think some people are just in constant analysis about absolutely everything that they're seeing, and they're casting a judgment on someone or some activity that they're seeing, and they're like forecasting situations, and they're trying, I don't know, it's probably all coming from a place of trying to achieve greater control or greater security within their situation. And then maybe the apparatus has just run amok, and now their mind is just doing a million things all the time.
Right.
But the gift of not having that going is that you can actually enjoy the very simple things, and you're not like looking at a beautiful tree and being like, someday that tree will die, and then it will be all decayed, and then it'll be a gross like molting tree. And it's like, no. We don't need to forecast that far into the future. Right now it is a beautiful tree, and yes, it's transient, and someday it won't be here, but
right. The mind is just so powerful in that way. It's really a sharp sword. And I can really like remember times like growing up where like my mind is like literally growing, physically and with its capabilities. And you're just getting like these newfound powers as you grow as a human, and you're just like waving your powers around like crazy. Yeah, so yeah, it just reminds me of like playing soccer. Like when I play soccer, like I'm constantly forecasting what's gonna happen next. And I remember like literally being a young child, and my like very serious like soccer coach like was like teaching me about this idea of anticipation, and you need to anticipate what the person's going to do so that you can then act and like cut off the pass and steal the ball. And so long story short, like I think there's a time and a place for that, like a sporting competition, right? But if you're like in a conversation with someone and you're constantly predicting what they're going to say and cutting them off and stealing the ball, you're just going to piss them off.
Yeah,
I think I did that for a while.
You're not allowing for the natural flow, and you're not allowing them to like experience some sort of enjoyable continuity of the conversation. Yeah, you're just kind of, you're running the show. It's a control sort of thing. And yeah, there are times to be in control and there are times to relinquish control.
Yeah, I used to like talk before people are done talking, or like as soon as they stopped, I would like start hammering them with like a bunch of ideas and stuff. And it's like, it's just so important to throttle that.
Yeah, it's good to have space. It's good for there to actually be enough of a breather so that the conversation doesn't become exhausting, so that it isn't just an expenditure of energy, but it's actually something that's enlivening and refreshing. Perhaps you just give yourself a break. You take a breath. Perhaps we do it right now. No one says anything. We're just all here together. It's rather nice when you think about it. Although I am still talking if you want to be technical.
Yeah, being alone together is a powerful thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's the marker of a good relationship that two people can exist in silence together and it's not uncomfortable.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I was like practicing that yesterday on a hike that I was on with two buddies. And so I did like a 6.5 mile hike on Sunday night, solo hike, and the trail was like so rocky, and I like ran up it, but I couldn't run down it because the way that the rocks were. And it was like getting close to sunset, like it was gonna be dark soon. So I had like, it was extremely like cognitively taxing. Anyways, the next morning my friends are like, we want to go hiking, like come with us. And I'm like, you know what, screw it, I'm going. So I'm kind of like tired on this hike, and like if I had like said everything that was coming into my head on that hike, my friends would have gotten annoyed with me because I don't know, my thoughts were a little sloppy. I was tired, maybe a little grumpy. But I simply didn't say those things, and it went very well.
Yeah, that's very well analyzed. I remember, I think maybe I've even said this before, but I remember I had an acquaintance growing up who was relentlessly negative. I didn't know her very well, but just every single interaction I had with her was just an outpouring of negativity. And it was apparent to me and it was apparent to everyone else. And well, maybe not everyone, but certain people. But it was just like, in hindsight, you could see that absolutely every time you interacted with them, the first thing they did was utter a complaint. And nobody really wants to be around that. So you don't need to share the contents of your thoughts with everybody else. In fact, being selective about that is a very intelligent thing. Like, what is it you actually do want to share and express? Like, you get to curate a space with the people that you're with, and don't just let it be what the autonomous functioning of your mind is, and you're just like dumping your mind into the space with your people. It's like, actually use your consciousness to say, what is it that I would like to experience with these people, and let me choose and express those thoughts. And let's actually like get to be more involved in what it is that's happening here, as opposed to just like I want to say letting it happen, but sometimes letting it happen is good. But I think there's a difference between letting it happen and allowing it to happen while being involved in a way that feels good.
I think you lost me.
Yeah, I think I lost myself a little bit.
But what you made me think of when you talked about this person was like that they have a blind spot, and that's that, like when they're negative, like they don't see themselves doing that. They don't quite understand the effect that it has on other people, because the effect that it has on them is actually it it's kind of it's a little bit sadist, like in the sense that they're like when you're negative and you drag someone down, like for some reason it feels a little bit good in a way.
Well, you're justifying your own existence in that negativity in a way. You're having someone validate your complaint.
Yeah,
That's what you're
exactly.
looking for. Is you're like, life is bad, right? And they're like, yeah, poor you. And then you're getting a little bit of sympathy, and then that feels
Right.
good.
And you're like forming rapport, but a negative rapport. Like you're
Yeah, you're pulling people into your experience, but it's a negative experience.
right.
But maybe you don't know the difference because that's just the state of being of what you're very familiar with.
Yeah,
And
I was in a friend group in high school, and we had like one buddy who'd always like be negative and like complain and like bring up especially like worldly negative stuff like, oh,
mm,
some person in the faraway place shot this other person, and like, dude, like what, like why is that relevant? Why are we bringing up negative stuff? And then me and this other friend would always talk about how negative our other friend was, so we're being negative about our
mm,
negative friend. So it dawned on me that yeah, the hypocrisy there. But
yeah, I
anyways,
mean,
yeah, we try and form rapport around something other than complaining together.
yeah, we there are other ways to build rapport. Absolutely. And it's a process of selection as to what we're actually choosing to engage with. And it could be, the possibilities are limitless. We don't have to talk about the murder that took place in Miami yesterday. It's like we could, but
Right.
is that really what we want to spend our time and energy paying attention to? Well,
Well,
how
I
would
think
that
what's
make us
lost
feel to
on
focus on that?
what was that?
I'm just like, I think it's worthwhile to think about what feeling and what state of being we're actually curating by engaging with certain ideas, and and what our intention is in so doing. It's not that we just have to gloss over anything that's bad, but like if we are going to be looking at something that's bad, let's at least go into it with the idea of like, what can I learn? What can I unravel? What can I actually like glean from this that actually is an uplifting thing, or is something that creates a new worthwhile element in my life as opposed to just spending my time contemplating negativity.
Yeah, you're definitely talking about like a level of consciousness there that's far beyond just randomly living your life and randomly talking about random shit that popped up on like whatever random screen you're watching, which is like kind of like the default. But basically, I think what's lost on people is creation, and like co-creating is what I love like doing and talking about. And it bamboozles me that so many people are not exercising their creative capacities um, nearly to the extent that I am, or that you are, uh, or that I think generally humans would have throughout their existence. Like, I imagine like you had to be very creative when you were trying to survive in much less developed civilization or no civilization. You were just out in the wilderness, that you didn't even call it wilderness, it was just the world. You were just
Mm-hmm.
out in the world, and there was very limited technology except your hands and your brain and your eyes and your and the tools that you made, and you had to be extremely creative in creating your own house, like creating your own meals, like from whatever you could forage and hunt and kill, and creating traps and fishing materials and boats. Like, you had to be creative every single day or you were going to die. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how we developed such creative capacities. And now it just like, I understand that people have to work a full-time job where they can't be that creative, and they have to do that to survive, and then they have their personal chores and their family obligations, and they have very little time at the end of the week or at the end of the day. But for me, like, I have to be creative. Like, that's extremely important for me. So if you look around my apartment, like, there's photography that I've done, there's like furniture that I've made, there's paintings, there's calligraphy, there's like, there's pottery, it's endless. And yeah, I love the internet for the reason that I've been able to connect with other creative people who have managed to exercise that creativity today.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's neat to think of creativity as being that intimately connected to survival, like that, because that's really, the creative energy, the creative juju within us is very much sexual energy. And sexual energy is the energy that gives rise to new life. And it also gives rise to any form of creation. This is the understanding within yoga, at least. And so to see it as being just such an integral element of humanity back when we lived in the wilderness, aka the world, which I actually had that same thought and conversation just like 2 days ago when I was in the woods with my girlfriend. It just came up. It was like, this used to be what everyone saw all the time. It wasn't just the woods. Like, this was it. Like, it was all this. But yeah, like, it's that creative impulse is really that closely linked to life itself. And to deny that creates a very stifling existence for a lot of people. And you're right, there's many people who don't get to exert that creative impulse in their working life, and then they have other obligations, and it feels like there may not be enough time to actually do it. But the way that you do it, at least this is the invitation, is to bring it into everything you're doing anyway, even if it doesn't actually call for it, even if it isn't really demanding creativity from you. You can infuse that creativity into your social interactions, into the work that you're doing, into the thoughts that you're having. I remember my friend, when he was asked, what is your creative outlet? He said, oh, it's jokes. I make and tell jokes as I'm doing my thing. And the response the woman gave to him was like, that's not a creative outlet. Like, I was talking about like art or music. And he's like, no, it is. It's jokes. Like, and it really is. Like, it actually takes a lot of creativity to be funny, and to think about like situations and craft a situation or scenario that's actually has some poignancy to it.
And then you have to refine it, like you would carve a sculpture out of marble. Like, you have that funny thing in your head, and you need to like whittle it down into like very few words that are sculpted in the right pattern, and you have to deliver it with the right tonality and the right pauses at certain times. And so it's very much an art form. It is very creative. You're literally creating sound waves that give people these full body reactions and release tension. It's incredible experience. And I'll never forget my first stand-up set that I did at an open mic. And I remember exactly who laughed, what they sounded like, what they looked like, where they were sitting in the room. And it was very, very powerful, because you're super nervous, and you deliver this thing you've created in your mind, and then it's like this real thing. And then to have positive feedback come back, it's like such a sigh of relief.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the expression of laughter is just it's such an interesting phenomenon, and it creates so many good things within the human who gets to experience the laughter, and the person who has curated that experience of laughter. The health benefits are innumerable. We know this of laughter. It's just, it feels good, and it actually promotes and creates a good situation within the physical body. So not everything needs to be silly, and we can be very sincere in our efforts. I think there's a great Alan Watts conversation that I love, where he goes back and forth on the difference between sincerity and seriousness, and being able to be very sincere in what you're doing. So very like well-intentioned, or like your intention is very strong, and you're doing something intending for it to happen, and yes, and it feels important, but also you're not getting bogged down in the seriousness of it. And because I think seriousness conveys some level of fear, and fear and comedy really they don't really meet. They're kind of incompatible, because when you're scared, you're not that likely to laugh unless it's a nervous laugh, and that's not really the same thing as a deep belly laugh.
Right. And there's great power in being vulnerable and just going all out on stage and like going 100%. And that allows people to release the tension inside them. Like it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay. Like
you're a form of therapist. You're conducting laugh therapy on
the
the masses who perhaps, well, they have signed up for it. They by their own admission, they've paid some money to be there, and they fully expect to experience some laughter. That is what they're trying to have happen there.
Yeah. So that sincerity is like just going all out, and like it reminds me of like Bill Hicks, who was so sincere and so committed to his craft and had so much confidence and conviction in his jokes that like when he bombed, like when the audience was tough and he didn't resonate with them and he bombed, he would actually, I'm not sure if enjoy it is the right word, but like he would lean into bombing, and it seemed like he was actually getting some kind of satisfaction out of bombing. And that level of sincerity, like I'm not sure if sincerity is the right word, but that's that level of confidence was so powerful for a certain subset of that audience.
Yeah.
They loved to see that. It didn't matter that 90% of the audience was dead silent.
Yeah, no, that's so cool, because that's a willingness to lean into what is. So it's dropping the script, like, because obviously you arrive at some sort of comedy venue with a prepared set of material, but there needs to be a good amount of malleability to what you're actually doing, and that is yoga. That is the ability to be flexible as the situation changes and presents itself differently. And so, and especially like that is a high bar, to lean into something which is ego challenging. So you're
Yes.
leaning into a situation where the audience is like not on your side, and the situation is not going well, and it has not gone to plan, and you personally are being subjected to a harsh situation. But to say, I'm just gonna go with it, and now like now we're in this thing, and it's not what I planned for, but now it's this. Now it's me bombing, and
Yep.
now I'm just gonna like now I'm gonna have a really good experience, which everyone is involved in, of me bombing instead of whatever I had previously intended it to be.
Yeah, you see that when I go to these open mics, like the guys who can do that are the guys who've been doing it for years and they've bombed like tons of times. And for me, I have good jokes, and on certain nights I have good delivery and good jokes. But when I start to bomb, I don't have like the years of experience bombing to like be malleable and like work with it and lean into it. Like and everybody bombs. It's inevitable. The audience is tired. You're not on the top of your game. The first joke doesn't hit. You get nervous. You show weakness, and it's all over. It just goes downhill real quick. And then people like they lean into. They go like they have like one-liners queued up that they say when they bomb, and I don't have those, but I couldn't even tell you one right now.
Yeah, you need some sort of like fail-safe jokes that start to like play into the bombing. I guess you can have some level of preparedness for that too. But I do think the highest level of execution is you really are just in the moment of it, and you're working with what is real, which is that the audience is not loving it. And so why would you try to just keep feeding them the stuff that isn't working?
The like usually they just like attack the audience. They go, "Oh, screw you guys," or like when nobody laughs, they, "Oh, fuck you guys," like and then like a couple of people will laugh, just like because you're acknowledging that you're bombing, and some people like think that's funny.
Yeah, it's a mission of the truth, in a way. Although they're giving themselves a little bit of an out there, which is that they're still not making it their own doing.
100%. You're 100% right. And what
Bit of
Bill
an ego
Hicks would
protection
do,
there.
he would flip the script, basically like the audience is like kind of attacking him by like not laughing or not saying anything. The silent treatment is just the worst. But he then flips it around and leans into the joke that they thought wasn't funny. So he leans into whatever they think isn't funny, and then now he has them hostage.
That is funny. Yeah, so like it's a change in the power dynamic. It's like, oh, you didn't like this one? Well, it turns out that it's just going to be like 20 more minutes of this thing.
Yes. And then the small subset that does think that's funny is having the best show of their life.
Yeah. Well, I remember this. This was the style of comedy that succeeded at the summer camp that I worked at when I was like 16, 17. And there was a group that came up right behind me. And two people in that group, one of them my very good friend, and another one a guy that I was kind of friends with, were both masters of this type of comedy, whereby they had essentially the same audience all summer. They had these people who couldn't escape. They had to be around day after day. We were all at the same summer camp. We're there for like 2 months, and there's, you know, you're not getting away from it. And they would initiate these jokes or these things, which were not really very funny. But then just through ad nauseum repetition and insistence upon these things, it became funny. And then everyone eventually was won over by it and found it to be hilarious. But it was just like, just a confidence and an insistence upon the same thing again and again until people are just like, couldn't help but like find it funny.
Yep, repetition like works. In advertising, it definitely works, and it even works on me. And I like to consider myself like resistant to persuasion in advertising, but simply like there's this thing in your brain where you hear it so many times, you're like, I'm not sure if this is the logic the brain does, but for me, it's like, all right, I'll click it. I'll click the link. I'll like just make it stop. I will laugh. I swear.
Yeah, if the car is going to keep beeping at me, eventually I will plug in my seatbelt. It's
Yes.
like, all right, you won me over.
Yeah. Yeah, repetition 100% works. I have this, one of my buddies who has a book and a podcast, Paul Millard. He had like an ad during his podcast, like advertising his book and saying like, please promote my podcast as well. And I just had this thought. I was like, well, that really wasn't a persuasive ad. And like, I'm like, what would be a more persuasive 30-second ad? And he just said, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book for 30 seconds. I would be more likely to buy his book.
It might work. Clearly, most advertising modalities seem to go for some form of repetition, especially if it's a longer thing. There's like, they tell you to do it, they give you a little more. They tell you to do it again, they give you a little more. They close by once again telling you to do it. And then that seems to work for a lot of people.
Yeah, like brand recognition. That's why like you see these like campaigns in like in like a 1 month period. I saw like the word TikTok like 10 times a day for like a whole month in 2020. And then you never see those ads again because they did their repetition campaign and then it's over.
So they've achieved their effect, and the word TikTok has been emblazoned in the subconscious of many, many people.
Yeah, you just like repeat it over. It's kind of like yeah, like what the media does like to get their narrative across is they just say the same shit over and over until it becomes true.
Yeah, they just keep saying it, and they refuse to say anything other than it, and then they just bombast the airwaves with it, and then they copy it across multiple sources, which are pretty much just the different expressions of the exact same.
They cite each other.
Yeah, they're all citing each other. It's like, here's what they said on this news channel. It's like,
reports
we're saying the same thing.
Yeah. The reports are in,
The reports that we made are in.
Oh, man.
Maybe we take a little 3-minute meditation break and come back.
Sure, yeah. I'm gonna grab some water.
And we're back.
So I heard that people, when they're relaxed, take 5 or 6 breaths per minute, and that's struck me as bullshit, but I suppose it could be true, and I'm just very far from relaxed.
Well, I don't know if we mentioned this before, but as I was learning about the different brain waves that people exhibit during breathing, they're noticeably different at like 2 breaths a minute, and then 1 breath a minute is considered to be like the creme de la creme of brain waves for breathing. So that's why I do something called minute breath sometimes, which is 15 seconds in, 15 seconds hold, 15 seconds out, 15 seconds hold out. And you can build up to that. You can just do like half of that. But I wonder if it really is just 5 or 6 for a relaxed person, if they're actually really relaxed. Because I know the breath slows down as you relax. That's 100% true. Whether it gets that slow for someone who's not even trying, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting is there's no device that I know of that's like affordable that you can like wear to like tell you how many breaths per minute you're doing.
Well, that's a niche that could be.
Yes. Like your iPhone will tell you steps and like calories, and like the rings and the bracelets will tell you heart rate. But
You could get a nose piercing, and then that's actually just, it just monitors the airflow between like in and out. It's just like a little step counter, but for your
right,
goes red in your nose piercing, which everyone has. Like how applicable, how perfect.
I guess I was imagining like a torso thing that like measured like your inflation of your chest or something.
Well, that
Um,
would actually be good to have too, because this is what I always encourage people to do during long, deep breathing, which is to get out of paradoxical breathing, which is something I used to do, and I think a lot of people did, which is that as you inhale, you're actually pulling your belly in. And that is paradoxical because you're not creating more space for the air to go. You're stealing space from your lungs and you're letting air in at the same time. And a lot of people breathe that way, whether they intend to or not. So it's worth
oh
discovering
yeah,
whether you're doing that, because
I just learned now that I'm doing that.
a lot of people do that. And the way that feels a lot better is to let your belly expand as you're inhaling, which is also something that we have a hard time doing in our culture, because then you're like letting your belly out and you're like, oh no, I'm fat. But it's actually better for you. Let the belly expand, let the lungs expand as you inhale, draw the belly in, collapse the lungs. Don't let your lungs collapse, but contract the lungs on the
Right.
exhale. And yeah, it just turns out to be a much more satisfying and healthy way to breathe.
This is a call to all of our listeners. Please either invent or send us the Amazon link to this device that will measure and analyze our breathing patterns and how good our form is.
Yeah, check your form and keep tabs on what your resting breathing rate is, and then you can adapt. It is, I think it would probably be fairly challenging to breathe less frequently than like 5 or 6 times a minute without your conscious intervention, because you kind of have to slow it down.
The nihilist would say, why does that matter?
Why would you do it?
Who cares? Who cares about this? Why are we even talking about this?
Well, because you're curating a state of being. Because as you breathe slower, you're actually changing the way that you feel, and you get to feel differently. Like why does anyone drink booze? Why does anyone get high? It's that they want to feel differently. Turns out there's some backlash to doing those modalities. This is a modality of feeling differently, which does not have a backlash, unless of course you asphyxiate. But
well, the backlash is that you start feeling stuff that you might. It's like sifting through your old emails that you don't want to read.
Yeah,
that can
is
happen.
backlash.
People can get flooded. That happens in yoga.
Yes, that could be the well-perceived backlash, and that is, I feel I've spoken on this before too, but that is what I feel to be the reason a lot of people don't think they like meditation, is because they are encountering some of those old things that they have stuffed aside, and then when they actually give themselves enough space, the body's like, okay, you seem to have enough room. You seem to have enough ability to process some stuff. We've had some gunk sitting in this corner over here for, what is it now, 12 years? I think it's ready to move. Like, I'm not interested in this gunk anymore. Are you finally ready to like let this gunk go? And so the person is presented with the gunk, and all they need to do in that situation is feel the gunk and let it go. But the instinctual reaction is the same as it was the first time, which is, I didn't want it then and I don't want it now, and I have some idea about why that is. So let's just let's paste that gunk back into the corner. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I had a beautiful conversation with a woman last night who told me that she has not done yoga since 2015, when she was in a yoga studio in a class and she got flooded and she ran out. she ran out of the room and didn't come back. And so I told her, like, yeah, like that's a thing that can happen. Like, you're not crazy. Like that can happen. And when you're in like it's not like she made the wrong move. Like she didn't want to be in that setting anymore, and she left, and that's fine. And I've had the same thing happen to me. Is what I told her. I've gotten flooded, and I was not at a yoga studio. I was in at my house, and I basically dove for the video game controller to move on to something else.
Yeah, Get me out of this emotion. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's like not going down that path, right? Not right now, at least.
Yeah. Well, actually,
And
this reminds me of an interesting story that my friend, my really good friend, had, and that was surprising to me because we'd been very close for a number of years, and he never told me this, but eventually he did, and he wasn't like withholding it, but it's just interesting that it never came up before like 10 years of close friendship. But when he was much younger, he became interested in astral projection, which is sending your consciousness beyond your physical body into the astral plane, which is something that the yogis talk about, of like maybe that's some sort of post-life thing. It's like your soul goes to like different astral realms, and then you spend some time there, and maybe you come back to this one in a different body or whatever. Anyway, all of that is a bit beyond my my scope, but some people are actually able to astrally project, which is to send their consciousness into the astral plane. And so I don't exactly know how he became aware of this. Maybe it was through philosophy courses. He was taking philosophy in university, but he became very interested in doing this. And so he started just lying on the couch and just keep saying with full conviction, I'm going to astrally project. I'm going to astrally project. I'm going to astrally project. And he just kept saying it and kept doing it. And eventually, through repetition, it happened. And he astrally projected, and he left his body, and he saw his physical body in like below him. And then I don't exactly know what else happened, but the whole thing was it freaked him out that it worked, even though it's what he wanted. I'm not sure he fully expected it to actually happen, but it did. And then he never wanted it to happen again, I think. And he became scared that it would happen of its own accord, or maybe it did happen of its own. I think it did start happening of its own accord when he was like sleeping, and so he would astrally project, and then he was like, now it's not within my control anymore. Now I'm just astrally projecting, and I don't really like it. So then he actually developed a weed smoking habit and started smoking weed like quite regularly every day so that it wouldn't happen. And apparently that was something that prevented its occurrence. So I just found that to be very interesting, that
yeah,
like sometimes even the things that we think we want, that's not really the point I'm making, but that is a kind of a tangential point. It's like figure out what you actually want, because when you get it, you might not be that interested in it.
Yeah, I have a story that you just reminded me of that I've never told before. And I almost hesitate to tell it because I don't want to give it any energy. But it's just so similar to what you just said, which is I would lie on the couch after school and I would stare at the ceiling, and I would I had been able to project patterns on the back of my eyelids, and that's not uncommon, closed eye visualizations. Although at the time I thought it was like some special power or something, and then I realized, like, what if I can do that with my eyes open? What if I can control that? Like, what if I can project onto the ceiling? And so I kept at it for a little too long, and it happened, and I projected an orange dot on the ceiling, and then I quickly realized, oh no, this could go horribly wrong. I do not want this power. And I turned it off, and I never looked back.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? Wow, thank you for sharing that.
Because the dot was like growing and growing, and I was like, oh fuck. This could go horribly wrong.
I could live in an orange world before long.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Like, I think we give ourselves more liberty like that when we're younger, that we really fully believe in our ability to do something like that, and then we actually do it.
But here's the thing, it can it's so common, the out of body experience thing. And this woman I was speaking with last night told me that she had a out of body experience. I personally have had, this is some time ago, but I believe I had something similar to that, where I didn't quite leave my body entirely. But I was getting pulled out, and it was extremely uncomfortable because there was an involuntary thing with some substances involved. But yeah, I blacked out one time and like went to a different dimension. That happened too. But I just wonder, like, I mean, like, we're not like really leaving our body. I think we're really going inward into different space.
Yeah, well, there's even there's a memorable Alan Watts conversation about this too, about localization in space, and like this idea of like, where is God? And it's like, it's not anywhere. It's not localized in space. It's kind of everywhere, and
Right.
yet nowhere. And yeah, there is that, even within space, even within space, the description when you're meditating is go within yourself, because that's what it feels like to people who have been meditating for a while. And when they actually have an experience of connecting with their own consciousness, it feels like you're going inward. Whether you're actually physically going inward or not is up for debate. Where are you going? Perhaps not somewhere localized in 3 space that we're familiar with, but the feeling is that it's inward. That's just kind of that's across people what it feels like.
Well, this could get very esoteric very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, simply we're defining the boundary of what is you, and we're using what people usually use, which is like the top of your skin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And where you can feel sensations. So if someone touched the table, I wouldn't sense that if I wasn't looking at it, therefore it's not me. But if someone touches my skin, then I sense it, and then so that must be me. So anyways, the point is this: what is inward and what is outward is just a function of what you perceive to be you. So basically what's happening is not that it is that you're leaving your body, in the sense that your body is not defining your conscious brain waves in that moment. It's something else. You're kind of, your brain waves are going into a much different state that's not exactly using your physical body the way it normally does. So that's why it feels like you're leaving your body. The definition of you is no longer your body in that moment. And that's why we say we're leaving your body. But it's not as if you're getting pulled, like you're going just to a different part. You're entering a different state. You're not leaving your body. You're going, like you said, inward. Even if you were to like literally have your life force sucked out of your body, you're not really leaving your body. You're just entering a much different body that you could define as you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for presenting it like that. Yeah, it is very interesting to think about what we deem to be ourselves, and how malleable that concept really is. And a shared commonality among a lot of people who have what they deem to be an experience of universal oneness, or non-dualistic awakening is also called. Their awakening to an experience of non-duality is that they feel that they are the things that they're seeing. Like a man I worked for a little while, Scott Kilby, had an experience of non-dualistic awakening, and he was patting his dog, and he'd been doing meditative practices consistently with no break for over a year, every waking moment, including pooping, just everything. He was doing a meditative thing at all times, and eventually he just felt, as he was patting his dog, that he was his dog, and he saw like this gold like glow of light around everything he was looking at. And he just felt like, whoa, this is weird. Like, I am my dog that I'm patting. Like, what's going on here? And then he walked over to like the window and looked out, and he saw the street lamp, and he felt like he was the street lamp. And then he just started feeling like he was all of the things that he was seeing. And
well, it's funny how when you say that, like our language isn't even set up to like communicate that experience.
Yeah,
he's having. It's not even like he felt like it was. It's that he was, and it's just that the he part is deleted.
Yeah, you don't need the word he anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. We don't have that built into our language to actually be an accurate descriptor of what that is. It's all feeling. And it's so interesting to come around to the experience of reality that feeling actually is one of the most valuable conveyor of truth that a person can have. And especially in our intellectual and information age and post enlightenment revolution of what our society is, the intellect is prized. And so it's interesting to to actually discover that the thing which is more real is actually the feeling, and
Right.
not the thought.
Yeah, definitely like one thing I've been pondering is physical sensations, and especially like physical touch and like physical presence with other people. Like I think we talked about this on another pod on another pod, or just in our personal conversations, like that feeling of being flopped onto other people
Mm.
is so primal, and that's there's so much truth in that that is not uh the language of words. um but yeah, I like there's a whole language just around eyes and being like feeling people's energy and like touching certain parts of their body, and the duration of the touch, and like dancing with somebody is like a form that like dance is a language, and massage is a language, and all like I hope these languages don't die out.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think we're entering a period where more and more people are recognizing the value of that. Because if you explained, or if you said to someone, I think what you really need to do is just flop into a heap with a whole bunch of other humans and just lie there for a little while, most people would be like, what? Like, why would I do that? Why would that be a
Dude,
good idea?
100%. Like nobody talks about that when they talk about like healing, like you're sick, and or like especially with like not necessarily like illnesses that aren't like viruses or bacteria. Probably flopping in a pile is not like the way to go, but non-communicable illnesses, which is what a lot of people are experiencing right now.
Mm.
um yeah, like physical touch is like a huge thing. And I remember like in like when I went to a talk therapist last year, it was like we just like talked, and even if we had like a great conversation, it felt like we need to like have a hug at the end, like because we had such a good like hour and a half conversation. And that just like wasn't an option on the table, like because like professional and insurance and like blah, it's like, oh no, there's so many people out there just need a daggone hug and they can't get it.
Yeah, that it's the simple cure for a lot of things. It's just actually bringing yourself into the light of another human being and just being embraced, and just like the relaxation response comes on full if you're in a hug for long enough that it isn't weird anymore.
Right.
Or if you're not in your head about it, if you actually give yourself over to a hug with a person who is trustworthy, then your body naturally relaxes, whether you intended to
Well,
or
here's the
not.
crazy thing. Liv Bory, who's an orator and a former professional poker player, who I followed for a number of years, she tweeted about hugging a tree. She said, like, have you ever hugged a tree? Like, I recommend choosing like a large tree that has like a good circumference. And like, she went into detail about her experience hugging trees, not in like the environmental sense of the word, but like literally she went out in the forest and hugged a tree for like a long period of time, like I don't know, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Um, and I was like hiking the other day by myself, and I just saw this like tree, and I think I was taking a break, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna go for it. Like if Liv did it, I'll give it a try. Like I really respect her. So, I gave this tree a nice long hug, and there was like clearly changes in my experience of that moment.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? I had the exact same, I had a very similar experience within the last week, or within the last week and a half. I was in the woods with my girlfriend, and I was encouraged to hug a tree. Like she was hugging a tree, and then I decided to have a moment hugging a tree. We both felt physiologically different after like 30
Physiologically
seconds.
different. That's the
Yeah.
big thing. It's like
It-
this isn't like pseudoscience. This is
no.
real deal stuff that
Yeah.
people aren't talking about in the mainstream, but they should be, because this is
Yeah.
immediate change.
It's an actual incredible benefit to the human who hugs a tree, because those trees are putting out some really good juju that is worth being a part of. I had a friend, well, he was a fellow student. We were somewhat close, but we took our Kundalini yoga training together, and we both became Kundalini yoga teachers. My interest at the time was just to further my own studies. I eventually did wind up sharing it with a lot of other people, and it became invaluable to the work that I'm doing. So that was great. But at the time, I just wanted to do more Kundalini yoga. And I'm not quite sure what his intention of becoming a teacher was. I think he wanted to share it a little bit, but he became a teacher, and so did I. And I became connected to that group of 40 or so people that I had that month-long immersion with. And in our follow-up communication, maybe a year later, maybe 2 years later, he just said to the group, like, "Hi guys, how's everyone doing? Hope you're all enjoying doing Kundalini yoga. Like, as for me, I've started doing this new thing instead, which is tree yoga, yoga with a tree." And it's like, so that's what I'm up to now, and goodbye. But we're just like, it was just funny because, you know, we had this shared powerful experience of how good Kundalini yoga was, and it was just like, oh, okay, this is a great modality, this is something that we're all doing and we're all out in the world. And then he just like reported in, and it's just like, yeah, I'm not doing Kundalini yoga anymore, now I'm doing yoga with a tree. And that's and we're like, so that's better than Kundalini yoga, huh? Like, all right.
I you know, I haven't really done a whole lot of yoga out in nature, but you know, why not?
Absolutely, why not? Yeah, I personally can't speak to that experience. I bet you it's fantastic. I mean, if hugging a tree for 20 seconds is great, how much better would it be to involve the tree in the yoga postures that you're doing and do like some back-to-back stuff? Like, I've done back-to-back meditations for quite a while, like 60 minutes, where you're just back-to-back with someone. You can feel their heartbeat, like, because you're connected by the heart through the back. And so those were some potent meditations. But to do that with your back against a tree for a significant period of time, I need to report back after I've done this. I simply don't know what that is, but I'm excited to find out.
Run the experiment, report back. We'll see you in the next pod.
And so it is. I commit to doing it, and I will let you know how it goes.
Roger that.
And perhaps that is a good time to sign out.
Excellent.
Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Subscribe to Weird and Worthwhile Podcast.